Hi and welcome back. Today I have another spread in my square watercolor journal, and I want to show you another technique that is a bit similar to the one I shared last week. I'm doing some, I would say, kind of stamping with stencils, and I'm using distress inks and also distress oxides. It's quite similar to the step when you have some brushes on your stencil and then you press some paper down. I just here inked up the stencil and I wetted it, and I'm pressing the paper into my journal. I haven't done this before. Maybe I've done it in the past with other stencils, but I can't remember. And it's a bit of a try and error process because I wasn't not sure how much water and which colors I would like to use. I'm just experimenting, but this is, I think, the fun part of the whole art process. I decided to use both sides of the journal. I usually don't do it because the paper in this journal is not that thick. It's, I believe, 160 GSM or maybe 180. It's a watercolor paper and it has some cotton in it, but it's not the best watercolor paper. But I think it's just fine for mixed media art journal pages and for collage. You don't need the best paper for these techniques. I'm switching the stencil. The first one I had was the Leaves one stencil, and I used it with, I think it was brushed Corduroy. I have not in mind how this ink is named. And this should be either walnut stain or ground espresso. I think it's the darker one, the espresso one. And I'm using the ink dots stencil. It's one of my favorites because it's quite simple and neutral, I would say. It's also really nice for jelly printing, and I like the outline you get when you do this kind of techniques with the circles. I think it's visible in this area and here. And I really like how it builds up texture with the stenciling. And I know already the final result is going to be really nice, and it's going to be a really interesting background. And this is definitely a technique I will use more often, especially on cards, for example, on artist trading cards or on these index cards I'm creating at the moment. For those of you who don't know what these index cards are, it's a challenge on Instagram, and you are creating or decorating an index card every day. And I think it doesn't matter which index card you have, and there must be a prompt list anywhere, but I'm not going for the prompts. I just decided to make one kind of project for this time. And so I also cut my own index cards because I don't have any here. And I cut some of them from watercolor paper, some of them from mixed media paper, and I just tried out different techniques every day, and I post them over on my Instagram channel, so you can check them out there. I also have some reels where I share the process. Well, I think I also shared some here in my YouTube shorts. I decided to heat set the journal before I kept on adding inks because I don't want to have a muddy background. And when you use distress inks, it's best to dry them in between and then add the next layer. Otherwise, everything will be mixed up, and that can look quite ugly in the end. I now picked a stencil, the crisscross one, with a bit more, I would say, white area. so I have a bit more ink on my page. And therefore I'm using that picked raspberry. I really love that pink and bold ink. And what I like about distress inks compared to watercolors, they stay vibrant once they are dry. If you're using watercolors, they will dry much lighter than they are looking on your paper. And with distress ink, that does not happen. And that's something I really like. And of course, you cannot use distress inks instead of watercolors because they have quite different properties, and also they are not light fast, I assume. So it's okay in an art journal and on greeting cards, but I would not make artwork that I want to hang up onto my wall with these inks. I decided to use a brush, pick up some of the ink from the stencil and smear it around on my page. I really like how this fills up the white areas. What I also recognized during the process was that it's quite important to not cover up everything. You need some white space to make it look interesting. I'm cleaning my stencil in between because I want to use it with another color, and I picked Pumice Stone. It's a gray color. I don't want to use too many bold colors. I think that pink together with the brown gray look is quite nice. I will add a bit of blue later in the process. And the same here, I'm using a brush and apply a bit more ink around my patterns. I really love how this is turning out. I think it's a fabulous way to create a background. I dried the page with my heat tool again, and here I'm using the, I believe, Spice Marmalade color to add a bit more of a bright touch. I forgot that I did edit this orange, but I think it's a quite nice decision. It matches the whole combo quite well. And I'm quite a bit, I think, afraid that I lost too much of the white, but I think it's okay as it is. I just try to not cover up the white in between those both pages, because then I think it would become too much. I'm drying everything again before I come back in with another layer. As I said, it's quite important to not mix up the inks, and also you get a much more interesting and dimensional look when you dry your layers in between. For my next step, I'm using some broken china. By the way, this is an oxide ink, the broken china, and also the Spice Marmalade was the oxide version. The oxide compared to the normal distress inks are opaque. They have some pigments in them. It's not only a dye-based ink. And these layer on top of everything. And so you can go on top with lighter colors on top of a bit more darker ones. Well, it's not 100% perfect, but it shows up, and that gives a nice depth again to the page. And I'm picking that broken china. It's kind of a more dirty blue, not as bright as some of the others, and it's complementary against the orange, and that's quite nice for the page. And when you're going in with the ink and the brush, the orange and the broken china are mixing quite nice to a green, and that just gives me some hints of green in some areas, and I think that looks quite nice. By the way, this stencil is our small ink dots. It's the same as the big one, just with smaller dots. And I also really like this one. It's super neutral. It's suitable for all kinds of projects. While the background is drying, I want to prepare some kind of focal image on the page. It took me a while in the end to figure out what I want to add. And here I'm stamping a circle from our Mix It Up stamp set. I believe it's the number 1, but I will link it underneath. It's a circle. It's also on the Grungy Stuff stamp set, which is a rubber set. And I really like this one. It's nice as a focal image or just as a collage element. And I thought about maybe I would use 2 of them, and so I'm stamping 2. Finally, I will use only 1. I'm using the picked raspberry distressing to just color in those circles. As that pink circle is quite small for the spread and it's not very contrasting against the background, I decided to make kind of a paper that it has a bit more contrast, and I'm using one of our Mix a Sentiment word blocks just as a background here, and I'm stamping it to simple white paper. I plan to cut out a circle from this one and lay it underneath my pink circle to just make that pink circle pop a bit more and give me some contrast on the page. From the leftover piece, I cut 2 smaller circles and I'm going to adhere them to the left side of the spread just to make look everything a bit cohesive. To adhere these, I'm going to use the Tombow glue stick. I have stamped them with the Versa fine clear ink, and what I recognized is that you have to be a bit careful that you don't touch the ink with some glue, because it will smear with the glue. So it's a bit something you have to take care of, because I'm messing up my smaller circles a little bit. I wanted to adhere the pink circle right away, but I recognized that there is something missing, and I'm picking that black thread that was on my desk, and I would just get some of it off and put it under the pink circle. For the main image, I already had some leaves here from last week's video. Not sure if I made this, but I shared how I'm doing these. And I think I will adhere this one with some words, and this finished up my page. I hope you enjoyed today's video and you are a bit inspired to create your own art journal background. And I wish you a wonderful rest of the weekend. Bye!